Well, thank you. Let me join Margaret in thanking you for being here and spending your time with us, hearing a little bit more about the work of global partnerships and the difference we're trying to make in the lives of people living in poverty. This 20th anniversary has been an important milestone for us. It's given us, the leadership team and the staff and the board of global partnerships, a chance to step back and reflect on where we've come from and what we've learned, what we've been able to accomplish and where we're going. And what I'd like to do today is just spend a little bit of time sharing some of those reflections with you. So let me begin at the beginning of the story, which of course starts with our founders, Bill and Paula Clapp. In the early 1990s, Bill and Paula decided to travel to El Salvador. It was a country that had been racked by civil war, a war involving death squads and child soldiers and human rights atrocities. And they spent time with survivors, mostly women, many of whom had lost husbands and fathers and sons in the conflict. And as they sat with those survivors and heard their stories of how they wanted to rebuild their lives out of the ashes of war and out of extreme poverty, they were moved to do something. And what they chose to do, of course, was to found global partnerships. And the spirit in which they did that no one should be invisible, that everyone deserves opportunity, and that if we come together, we can do something better, has really been the guiding inspiration for global partnerships over the past 20 years. Now, the reality of global poverty that Bill and Paula saw in El Salvador and that we see in the lives of millions of people around the world today looks something like this. And I always like to start my talks with trying to ground ourselves in what we're really talking about. So if you take a look at the home in front of you, that's an image actually of a woman, Miriam, and some of her family. That home has a dirt floor. It has no electricity. It has no proper sanitation. It has no running water. That family actually walks to a community well where the water may or may not be clean in order to get the water they need, and they store it in that blue bucket in the front of the house. And they cook on a makeshift stove, which is out of that oil drum, which you see in the front of the home. So when we talk about expanding opportunity for people living in poverty, we're talking about people that are living in conditions like this and asking ourselves, how do we do things that help them to improve their own lives? So the work of global partnerships began with something called microfinance. And as I think many of you in the room know, you're familiar, it involves making very small loans to very poor people to start very small businesses so they can begin to earn a living and improve their life. And what we did for the first decade was we were a grant maker. We would find local organizations, first in El Salvador, and then more broadly in Central America, and we would make grants to organizations so that they could create access to microfinance for people living in poverty. And we did that for a decade. And in the course of that work, we learned a few things and took those learnings and fundamentally shifted our approach and our strategy so we could try to have more impact. And what I'd like to do is share a little bit about some of those things that we learned and give you a little bit of a sense of the journey we've taken. So the first thing that we learned is that it takes more than a small loan to make a real difference. The loan's important, it's very important, but it is necessary and not sufficient. And so what let me try to bring that to life with an example. So imagine that you are a small lot coffee farmer. So you're trying to provide for your family on an acre or two of land, and you're trying to grow coffee and sell it. So you need the loan. You need the loan because you need to buy plants and seeds and maybe fertilizer. You may need to buy a basket or some equipment for the coffee. So the loan's important, but you also need training. You need training on what are the best practices for improving yields, for getting the quality of the coffee to the right place, for what the shade cover should be, whether it's bananas or cacao. Training which allows you to improve your yields and stabilize and diversify your crop. And so the loan plus the training makes a bigger difference in terms of helping people to generate income. And you need one more thing. You need access to markets. You have to actually sell your coffee. And it's much better, rather than having to sell your coffee when it's all harvested into some local intermediary, you get a much better price if you have access to a fair trade coffee contract. And so what we learned was that the loan was important, but we needed to go beyond the loan to include training and to include access to markets if we really wanted to help people begin to stabilize their incomes and improve them over time. So lesson number one, it takes more than a small loan to make a real difference. Second thing we learned is that there's power in the channel. And let me tell you what I mean by that. In global development, one of the most difficult challenges is how do you actually get the things that make a difference in people's lives to them on a sustainable basis? How do you do that for millions and millions of people living in poverty? And what we began to realize is that the distribution channel, the way the loans actually flow to the people living in poverty, created a unique opportunity to have broader impact. So let me give you an example. One of the biggest killers of women, of preventable deaths in women in Latin America, is cervical cancer. It's a disease which can be screened for and, if detected early, can be treated. And microfinance, what happens in many cases is that the women gather in what are called village banks every 2 to 4 weeks, and they're there to repay the loan. So the image you have in front of you, there's a group of women, they've gathered in a village bank, and what the piece of paper that you see on the right-hand side of that slide is actually the record of them repaying the loan. Now, while you're there, they're already there for the village bank meeting. You can train them on the risk of cervical cancer, what is involved with screening. And then every 6 months, when they go to the local branch to get their loan disbursement, you can provide free screening for cervical cancer. In the process of doing this in Nicaragua and elsewhere, we've had tens of thousands of women screened, and those that have tested positive treated. So we can leverage the microfinance channel for broader impact, in this case in health. So lesson number 2, there's power in the channel. Lesson number 3, it takes markets to reach millions. Okay? So what happened with microfinance is it took a lot of effort and a lot of philanthropic support in the early stages of the work, and it became market sustained, and then it scaled. So microfinance now serves almost 200 million clients around the world. If you think about family sizes, it touches the lives of about 1 billion people. So almost 1 in 7 people on the planet. Okay? That demonstrates the power of market-based solutions to poverty. And what we began to realize is if we want to bring opportunity to millions and millions of people, we need to harness the power of markets for good. So let me give you an example of what we think will be the next microfinance. If you look at the image on the screen, it's a solar light. So solar technology now, some of them, very simple lights, cost $15, $20. Some small systems with a little panel and 4 lights and a cell phone charger cost $100. So the reality is if you live off the grid, if you're like Miriam, the image that I showed you earlier, and you live off the grid, you're likely burning kerosene for your light. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, it's very expensive for the family living in poverty. The smoke is terrible. It causes health issues for children. You risk burning your house down, and it's terrible for the environment. But if you actually, besides that, it's perfect. If you actually go and talk to the families and you show them these lights, they love them because they actually save money by buying them. They save more on from not buying kerosene than the light costs. You get all the smoke out of the house, the light's better, you can study more, you can read more in the evening, and of course it's better for the planet. So we think 10 years from now, solar technology is making a difference in the lives of people living in poverty will be the next microfinance. We'll be sitting here talking about how many millions of people are impacted by them. The fourth thing we learned is that if we want to bring opportunity to millions of people, we need to think differently about capital. And capital isn't a particularly sexy topic, but it's an important one. The traditional way of thinking about capital is that we have charity, right? And we look for a cause we care about, we look for a low overhead ratio, and hopefully the charitable contribution does some work. And then over here we have traditional investing, which is all about maximizing profits and financial returns, right? And what we realized was if we want to support these market-sustained solutions, we need to think differently about capital. So what we did was we said, philanthropy, this precious resource called philanthropy, we need to use it to learn what works, to really understand what's making a difference in people's lives, to pilot things and test things, to take risk, and to get the flywheel going, just like it happened with microfinance. And then when it becomes sustainable, then we can use investment capital that it just doesn't care about profit, it actually cares about people, right? Because there's just not enough charity in the world to do it the old-fashioned way. We have to use philanthropy to get things going, and then investment capital to sustain and grow things that really make a difference in people's lives. So what has that meant for what we've been able to accomplish? In the first decade of our work, hopefully in the first decade of our work, we were able to make grants into local organizations that created access to economic opportunity in the form of microfinance to about 23,000 people. And I'm hoping that this figure will come up on the screen for you. There we go. So a decade of work doing the heavy lifting in the pioneering era of microfinance, 23,000 lives touched. So 23,000 people like Miriam and her children had access to economic opportunity. When we applied these lessons in the second decade of our work, going beyond the loan, leveraging the power of the channel, looking for other opportunities that are market sustained, and using capital differently, we were able to increase our impact on mission by more than 100-fold. So today, more than 2.6 million lives have been touched with economic opportunity and health and solar lights that didn't have that opportunity previously. Thank you. And so where do we go from here? Well, here's what you can expect in the next decade. We're going to continue to look for opportunities to expand and make a difference in the lives of Miriam and so many people that live that way. That may involve market-sustained solutions to sanitation or clean water or clean cook stove technologies. So we'll continue to innovate on the edge of what are the things that can make a difference and that can scale to reach millions. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to continue to look for smarter and smarter ways to use capital. So every dollar that is given in this room, we want to put it to the best possible use and turn it into more opportunity for more people. And third thing is we're going to expand geographically. We began in El Salvador. After our first decade, we were active in 4 countries throughout Central America. We're now investing in supporting partners in 12 countries throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And next year, we'll be looking at East Africa. And why we'll be doing those things, the point is, of course, back to our mission. So we have a simple goal. The mission stays the same. It's to expand opportunity for people living in poverty. And our goal is to bring opportunity that touches, in the next decade, 30 million lives. So we want to do 10x again. What we need, thank you. Let me simply close by saying that none of what we've been able to accomplish would be possible without the people in this room and the people who have come before you in preceding years. Your support is what makes all of this work possible, all of the learning, all of the innovation, and all of the impact. So thank you for being here, and thank you. We hope that you'll continue to be a part of our journey. Thanks.